What's going on, guys? This is Mundo Marcus. If you're a construction subcontracting company and you feel like you could increase your value one way or another, or even if you're just starting off and you don't really know how you can be translating your value to your potential clients, to your ideal customers, then I think that this video is going to be for you. I made this video because after 18 months of business, I've discovered that every client, new, current, ongoing, whatever kind of client, goes through the same process. And in this same process, there are three phases where I've identified as the three ideal places or opportunities where you can really translate your value as a subcontractor to these GCs. Because at the end of the day, it is my belief that in this industry, if you're coming in to make money, if you're coming in thinking you're going to exploit this industry, I think you're going to come into it with the wrong perspective. But rather, if you come into it thinking, hey, I'm coming in to really impact GCs in a way that they're not used to, which is by providing real value, communication, etc., then you're going to be doing the one thing that's going to help you really have that change in future that you want for you and your family. And that's by focusing on long-term relationships. So I'm excited for this call. I've had this call in my mind for the last week. And, this last week we came into our new office. So this is the first episode that I'm recording from our office. So that makes it a lot more special to me. And, I'm really excited to talk about this topic because I think this is something that's really important. And if you're able to really differentiate between these phases and understand when you have the opportunity to make an impact on your clients, it's going to be very beneficial for your business going forward. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mundo Marquez. My family and I decided to start our own subcontracting company 18 months ago, and we have successfully grown that to having over 10 clients combined between residential and commercial that are giving us consistent work. I make these videos because this helps me better understand my solutions to the problems that we're currently facing. And I also hope that they will help other subcontracting companies. It is my belief that if you can learn these quicker, if you can adapt these kind of perspectives that today I've realized make the difference for us, you will be able to be, where we're at today quite a lot faster. The name of this sub-talk episode is going to be Create, Increase, and Maintain Your Value. There are really three main phases, right? It is my opinion that there are three main phases where we can show and increase our perceived value to our GCs. Perceived value, right? I think that this is important because this is a concept that I thought I understood, but I didn't have a lot of clarity. Today, 18 months later, I really appreciate the fact that from the very beginning, I was really obsessed about being able to communicate the value that we have through our emails, right? And then that's what took me down the path of the outbound emailing, and then very organic in the way that I was reaching these new clients. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a video on my YouTube that explains exactly how I outbound email. Check it out, it'll help you out. So there's three main phases, right? Phase number one is going to be the outreach phase. So in my opinion, this phase is the hardest. Then you go into phase number two, which is the active phase. This is when I think we as subcontractors have the most growth in the value that we're able to provide. And then phase number three, which is the downtime phase. And this is the phase where you're going to have the most impact on your GCs. Okay, I had a great conversation with a friend of mine. He is a GC in Utah, does over 20 million a year. And one of the stories that he gave me really solidified why the downtown phase is actually the most impactful. So all of these three phases are important. Okay, like I said at the beginning of this video, I've came to realize that these three phases are a constant, meaning they happen with every client. So they're all three very important, but in my opinion, there is one that takes priority over the others. Okay, so I'm going to share with you which one I think that is after I explain each one of them. Outreach phase. Okay, this is phase number one. This is the hardest phase in my opinion. And the reason it's the hardest phase is because there are very few interactions with your clients, right? This is when no one knows you. This is when all of a sudden you're this 28-year-old dude that has this crazy idea with his father, and his father listens to him. And they also have a sister who has experience in the industry. And so we had this idea that we were going to begin this company. And so the first thing that we need to do is find clients, right? And this is during the outreach phase where it's hard. A lot of you that have reached out to me have reached out to me and tell me, hey, I've been emailing, but I haven't gotten the same responses I did, in the first five. Or some of you guys tell me, hey, man, I've sent over 50 emails and I haven't gotten no responses. This is why it's the hardest phase, because this is when you have the least amount of interactions. And so they have to be very, very detailed into the way that they are. But nonetheless, if you don't go through this phase, you're never going to be able to land a GC. You're never going to be able to land a contractor or an ideal client, whoever that may be for you. So it's absolutely necessary. But I like this phase because when I talk to individuals, I can read, like, if they haven't really had 3 to 5 ongoing projects at once, I know that they're mostly still in this outreach phase. And this is where the new businesses get shaken out, hands down. Like, I've seen it. I was at the point where I was losing a lot of belief in what we wanted to create here. Thankfully, we stuck through it. But as soon as you stick through that is when you really enter the phase after this. But this is where business owners and decision makers have to understand that, hey, if you don't start looking at this industry like you want to be here for the next 10 years minimum, it's going to be very difficult. There are going to be a lot of challenges because construction is a fucking monster. It is its own beast, and I think a lot of people underestimate it when they come in because they're filled by these online guys who are killing it as roofers and concrete guys. But you know, even if whether they're lying or not, independent of what they have going on in their content, it doesn't matter. They've been doing it for the last, at least 5 years. And so don't think you're going to have that kind of result day one, right? Because today it's taken us 18 months to get to where we are, which was from my mom's laundry room and my room to our own office. It's taken us 18 months, but that's only 18 months of an active registered LLC. I had still spent about a year before that simply understanding, simply talking to GCs, simply seeing how am I going to come into this industry and really studying the market so that I could have this kind of growth once we went all in. Okay, so continuing with the topic at hand, this outreach phase is going to be your first hurdle, right? So this is when you have to really understand what kind of message are you going to be telling your clients, right? Again, this ties in directly to the time whenever I was figuring out all of my outbound email, because I needed to realize, what do contractors want to hear from me as a stucco and siding vendor, right? And then, how much time are they spending? Are they opening my emails? When I'm talking to them, typically you have about 4 to 5 active minutes where they're actually alive in their, not alive, but like present in their call, right? And so you have to be very direct with it. So the first hurdle for me in this phase was simply generating a response. And again, that makes it hard because there was so much time when I wasn't generating a response that it made me lose a little bit of patience. But thankfully I was able to stick it out. And in this same phase, there's two things that happen, right? You start connecting with the client that you want, or you start just creating clients. What I mean by that is, when you start just creating clients, it's a little bit more towards like the easier path, which means, and listen, there is no right way of doing it. I think you have to dip your toes a little bit into the easy path, but then just understand that you want to steer back to the hard path, right? Because the easy path, and at least it was for me, was getting on Facebook, right? And getting the jobs that the people were posting on Facebook. That was the easy path because I knew that there was clear work right there. I didn't have to do much marketing. These guys had some kind of a need, even though they were low ballers and they wanted to get cheaper prices, right? At least I had some kind of work to bring in. And so I took that path for I would say about a month, and I was able to land 2 clients from that. So that's a little bit of easy path, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to find a client where they just set their prices for you, right? Because there's 2 different type of contractors out there that I've noticed. There's a type of contractor who has already been burnt by cheap labor, and so they respect a subcontractor managing their own materials and labor, and they respect their price when they see it that the value is there. And then there's the contractors that don't really care about that, and they try to outsmart the game. And so what they do is, they know that if you don't have a lot of work, if you're reaching out for work, it may be because you're a little newer. And so what they do is they tell you, hey, we have X amount for your trade in this project, like take it or leave it kind of thing. And the subcontractors that take those work start forming this habit that just kind of blinds them and tells them, I'm super busy with all this work. But just being busy doesn't mean that you're having good, healthy growth, right? Because you could be busy with a bunch of work and you could be making only, 10, 15, maybe 20% per job, right? When you could be making 50% net profits. But you have to lean towards the hard path, and the hard path is waiting, and the hard path is understanding what your ideal client wants and understanding what these GCs like to see. And so that's the time that I've taken to identify that, in the initial phase, in this outreach phase, the number one way to increase your perceived value from a GC is how well and how clearly you follow up. This is where it happens. Like, this is why the follow up is so important, because you have very little, like, you have almost no opportunity to prove your value. But the one way that you can prove it is that you follow up with them consistently, you're professional about it. They start to see you as somebody who's responsible, somebody who's accountable, someone who is wanting to work, right? You have that drive. And this communicates a lot to the GCs that, hey, man, this guy's persistent. Let me give him a shot. Okay. And so once you get to that point, and this could be 4 months, it could be a year and 6 months, like it took me to really get past this outreach phase. But once you get that, you then start transitioning into what I like to call phase number two, the active phase. So in phase number two, this is where we have the most growth as a subcontractors in our value, for our clients, right? Because this is when you have the most interaction. So in the outreach phase, all we were doing was having very little interaction, trying to find any little time that I can follow up with them and remind them of potential work or whatever. So there's very little interactions. But in this phase is when you have the most interactions, right? This is it, man. We're performing. It's game time. Like, we're here. We already spent, preseason, and we spent all week training, and we spent, one whole day reviewing tape, and we did all that to get this opportunity where we can perform. Now, this first active phase with a new client is typically always like a very little job, right? They're trying to see who you are. You got to think about it, man. These contractors are going to give you, hundreds of thousands worth of work each year. They want to make sure that they're bringing up new people that they're going to trust, right? Most of the time, GCs have not had bad experiences with their current subs. So you had to think about it in their perspective. Like, why would they come and give you work? Right. And this conversation stems, or this point that I'm saying stems from a conversation that I had this week where the GC called me back and said, hey, man, your prices are not bad. They're competitive. They're there. He's like, but I got a question for you. Why would I give you the work when I haven't had a single issue with any of the guys that I have now? And my response was, yeah, you're absolutely right. And you don't have to. I'm betting that you can recognize that I'm competitive. I'm betting on the fact that they can see that we're professional, see that I turn in my estimates whenever I said I would. And then, 5 years later, let's see who outperforms who, right? Let's see if the current sub literally goes 5 years without any big screw ups, without any big moments where they have to take accountability. Like, I want to see at that level of accountability, when they do the work completely wrong, what kind of action do they take towards that GC? Do they value the GC just like the way the GC is valuing them today, so that he doesn't award me? We'll see, right? But in 5 years, I will remain my consistent outreach to this contractor. And when I get that one opportunity, which is the one that I'm talking about here in the active phase, I'm going to be here and I'm going to perform, because it's lights on and the game is on, and I'm there to win. When it's game time, you have to be able to showcase everything that you are communicating to these GCs in the outreach phase. And so for me, I'm always, telling them, hey, man, we're super accountable. We have English speaking people on the job site. We're super clean. We come with solutions and not problems for you guys. Our communication is top tier. You're gonna know everything that's going on within your job site when we're doing our scope of work. So if this is what I'm saying during the outreach phase, then it's absolutely understandable that during the active phase, you better show this. They better see how accountable you are. They better see that you do come with solutions when you let them know that something wasn't framed right, but here's how we can fix it. They better be having very good communication. So this is where we differentiate ourselves with our actions, right? So it's no more good follow-up. It's no more good talk and persuasive skills. It's none of that. It's all right, let's see what you do, right? Let's see that finished product, right? Let's see how cleanliness your crews are, right? Let's see the professionalism of your crews. Okay, let's see the professionalism of your office, right? How are you sending your invoices, right? How are you sending your proposals? Like, all right, it's game time, right? And so this is where you set yourself apart when you do the shit that you said you were going to do. And so I was having a conversation with an individual about this. He asked me, well, how? What are some examples, or what are things that I can focus in that I can say, okay, this is where I can communicate or increase my value as a sub. And so there's a few of them that I think are the ones I tend to prioritize, which is timeliness, right? How are you turning in your stuff when they said, whether that's a change order, whether that's a estimate, whether that's the work itself, cleanliness, right? How clean are you maintaining your job site? How clean is your crew when they show up? You don't want, we don't like guys who come and try and work in shorts and gym shorts and like tennis shoes. Like, dude, you're in an active job site. There's nails everywhere. It's super unprofessional in my opinion, which ties to another one that's here, which is safety, right? A lot of these GCs, these are their active projects, man. They're responsible. It's their license on the line, right? If you can prioritize safety on your behalf, they'll take notice to that, and that'll definitely give you some value points in their eyes, right? The professionalism and obviously the quality of the work that you're turning in. So I've talked to a lot of contractors throughout the last couple of years, right? And I actually have a story around this because I went to a contractor in an event last year, and it was nothing but contractors. I think I was literally the only sub there. And every time the word subcontractor came up, every time sub came up, right? All these contractors had this inside joke, which is like, oh, it's the worst thing. And their viewpoint was literally this: they saw subcontractors as somebody who they needed, and at the same time, they didn't like that they needed, right? Because they're so hard to work with, because they suck at communicating, because it's hard to communicate with them because no one speaks English, because they want to submit change orders for every little thing. And so I realized there is a huge opportunity in just being the opposite of that, because every sub is a headache. Very few subs are pleasant to work with. Do what you can to be a sub that GCs want to work with. GCs themselves in this event all communicated to me. It was like, I would ask them the same thing. Hey, what does a very good sub for you do? And they were all like, oh, communicate, oh, English speaking, oh, easy, problem solving. So all of these little things are the ones I started writing down, and I started tallying them up. And the one that always came up was communication, was cleanliness, were the ones that I'm focused on right now. So do what you can to be a sub that these GCs want to work with, because I guarantee you they'll take care and they'll make sure that you have consistent work. So transition over to the last phase. The last phase, the third phase, is the downtime phase. And this downtime phase, it is, I think that it is the most impactful. This is when a little bit of the roles have changed, and there's different things going on your GC side, and then on your side, that allows you to really fully leverage this downtime phase. But I also think it's one that's really easily overlooked, because this typically happens when you've already been paid for that job, right? When that job has already been closed on your end. So you got to remember, GCs, they're there from the beginning of the job to the end of the job. You're there just from the beginning of your scope to the end of your scope. Sometimes for me on siting, that could literally be 2 days. That could literally be one day, you know? And for them, you're talking about a year's worth of a process that they're going down, from the minute that they got the client to permitting, clearing land, all the way up into turning in that house, right? So you got to understand this, and understanding it, you realize that there's very little interaction during this downtime phase. At the outreach phase, there was very little interaction from you to them, or from them to you, because you were reaching out to them, trying to inquire and trying to get answers and feedback, or whatever it may be, approvals on proposals. Then you transition to the active phase, where it's a lot of communication going on. You have questions on ongoing projects, they have questions on ongoing projects, change orders, updates, all of this jazz. So there's a lot of interaction. And then you go to the last phase of this process, the third phase, the downtime phase, where now the roles have switched, right? You're not necessarily reaching out to them because that job is done. you're moving on to the next one or the third one, right? Or however many you may have going on at one time. But now that contractor is going to be reaching out to you. So there's going to be very little interaction where they're reaching out seeking your response, right? So now you have the ability, because they need to communicate to you, you have the ability to show them how responsive you are, right? How quickly are you getting back to their issues? Because what happens is in this downtime phase is that your scope is done. Then you enter a place where, at least for me, for high-end custom homes, right? We're looking at about 3 to 4 months of downtime where they're closing that job and then they're doing permitting for the new job. And then the new job gets started to where we're able to fulfill on our scope. And so during this time, they're dealing with a lot of changes. Client isn't happy with a certain look or whatever. Something may have been damaged from another trade that you got to go fix. And so these little punch outs become little, just tedious, annoying little scopes that need to get taken care of on their end and on your end, right? And why I say on our end is because I've seen subcontractors who at this phase just drop the ball in the communication, right? They may have done a great time at the outreach phase and then during the active phase, but then downtime phase comes when they've already been paid and their job is already closed, that they drop the ball and they don't answer as promptly, right? Some of them just don't, and I've been awarded jobs because some of these subs that complete the projects don't come back to fix, a little $200-300 thing. And so it is hard. It is hard during this phase, but it is the most impactful because every one of these matters, right? And I've identified that in this time is when I drive the most value to myself because I continue to prioritize their calls. I continue to prioritize their emails. And when there's an issue that arises or in these some kind of added cost, I'm very prudent about the things that I charge for and the things that I tell them, hey, I'm gonna help you out with that one. So every one of these conversations matters because there's just high emotions, man. You got to think about your GC. Your GC has been working with these clients for maybe a year. They're down to the end of it. The clients are anxious about moving into their new home. The contractor wants to close on their project as well as you. So a lot of these calls are the hard calls. A lot of these calls are the calls that the GCs come and say, hey, man, you fucked up on this. And they're trying to just find somebody to put the blame on so they can solve that issue for them, even though there are circumstances where sometimes they may be right, sometimes they may be wrong. I think at the end of the day, you have to enter every one of these conversations knowing that you are going to somehow or some way solve this for them. At least that's the perspective that I take on, and it helps me dumb down my ego, and it helps my ego not jump up whenever they're like, hey, you messed up, right? Rather it's, I hear you, let me go and check it out, and then I'll touch back base with you with a solution. So there's a lot of high emotions involved in this phase, and so this is why it's very impactful. If they're exposing themselves with a lot of emotions, then they're also exposed to have a lot of impact towards them, right? Because if someone calls that you're really mad thinking cussing you out and all this, and all of a sudden you tell them, hey, you're right, let me fix this for you, then they're like, oh, whoa, what? That's different. Most of the subs want to charge me an arm and a leg for this or the other, or want to deny the fact that this happened. But this guy kind of just like said he'll solve it, right? You're leaving an impression. It's easy to do that when there's a lot of high emotions going on. So how or what are some ways that you increase your value during the most impactful phase, this downtime phase? Number one overall for me is just take accountability, right? Take accountability in the stuff. If you agreed on something, even if it's verbally, you have to keep to it. Like, this is just so important because, like I said, these guys are at the end of it, they're crunching on their numbers. They're really tight on their numbers most of the time. And so if you guys are agreed on something and you're thinking you want to make an extra buck because you may not have work or whatever it may be, all I'm sitting here and telling you is don't do that. Keep your word, right? Think about the guys that you're working with. Like, these GCs are 50, 60-year-old men who have been in this industry for ages, and their values are old time values, right? They value word of mouth. I'm not saying do everything word of mouth and not put anything into agreements. I put everything that I can into an agreements, but I'm saying be understanding about different situations where if you can just give them that little bit of work for free and you run with the cost, how much more of a benefit that's going to actually be for you, right? Because it can work against you as well. So for example, I had a GC who told me, hey, there was a little like freaking 45-minute punch out that needed to get taken care of. And I told him I would have done that 2 weeks ago. And it's barely getting done today, right? 2 weeks later. And so I completely forgot about it. One, I find it really hard to price these 45-minute jobs because I don't want to overprice them. I feel like it's very unfair. And so what that does is that causes me to not put importance on it, and not putting importance on it now backed us up 2 weeks for completing that for this GC who I value. And so when he called me very upset, he had all the right in the world to be upset because I told him that it would get done. He's used to things getting done when I tell him. And when it didn't happen, he was upset about it and he has every right. And so what I did was I told him, hey, I screwed up. I didn't prioritize it, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get it taken care of by this weekend, which is getting done today. And then I'm not going to charge you for it. Don't worry about it. I'll run with my guys' overhead. So this is actually a very nuanced kind of way to think about it that my dad has really taught me. And that's that, this individual, you have an opportunity right now to impact two individuals, your GC that you already messed up with, and one of your in-house guys so that they can continue to be happy to work with you and continue to increase the culture you're looking to bring around the business. So what my dad does, like, all right, we already messed up. We can give him that day for free, but he doesn't just give that little 30, 45-minute punch out where he pays the full day to that guy, to anybody. He gives it to the people that are showing that they're taking pride in their work, that continually go back and fix little areas that they don't like, right? Because they're a little more bought into the quality that we're selling on the front end. And whenever there's guys that do that and exemplify those kind of habits or whatever, my dad rewards them by giving them these 30, 45-minute job punch outs and giving them their full day for it. Okay, but he doesn't just give that to anybody. These guys literally show us that they care about the quality that they're turning in. And so my dad in return shows them that he values that by giving them these little, 30, 45-minute Sunday jobs where he pays them their full day's worth. So this is a really good time where you can increase your value within your employees, and definitely within your clients, especially when you mess up the way I did. So the one that's most important is the downtime phase, right? I really think that this can make or break their experience with you. You could have had an exceptional follow-up process. You could have had an exceptional job. You could have done the best work where their clients were telling you how well of the work it was. If during the downtime phase, you do something to screw up that experience, the GC is more susceptible in not giving you work in this downtime phase, regardless of how well everything else was, right? That has already happened. It's already passed. Like, people don't remember that when there's a lot of emotions involved, right? This is why the downtime phase is so important. I'll give you an example. Last week, I was talking to a very good friend of mine who's a GC in Utah. His name is David, and David does over 20 million a year, right? And he was telling me, I asked him specifically, hey, what's one recent thing that a subcontractor has done that has told you or made you want to give them more work, and vice versa, one that's told you, hey, I'm no longer going to give this guy work. The second one was the one that impacted me the most because he told me there was a drywall guy who he was using. And he said, hey, listen, I know that in the first floor of the house, there's a certain type of drywall. And in the second level, there's a second type of drywall. I want first and second to match. Like, don't go with what the plans say. Go with what I'm telling you, which is, I want it to be this way, whatever way that may have been. And so the drywaller and him agreed on this. After the drywalling was done, David went and realized that he followed the plan and didn't follow what they had agreed on. And so he approached the sub and said, hey, man, we agreed on this. So why isn't it like that? And, the drywaller is pretty much saying like, hey, dude, that's just what the plan say. I went with what the plan say. If you want me to change this for you, like you say, then that's going to be an extra $3,000 back charge. And so David literally told me, he's like, Ray, I will no longer give that guy work. He's not going to give that guy work. What David told me was like, dude, I had $250,000 worth of drywalling work for the rest of the year for that guy that he's no longer going to get. So even though he had done previous jobs with David, even though he had given David an exceptional experience with him during the last jobs, even though he did quality work, he didn't respect what they agreed on and chose to back charge David $3,000 rather than look at the long-term picture. So he left like $250,000 worth of work on the table simply because he didn't realize how important it is at the end for you to simply say, hey, I'll eat that $3,000 cost. I'll redo it for you because you're right, and being accountable and realizing that they did agree on that. He chose not to take that path. He chose to take the easy path with just $3,000 today, and that caused him 250,000 in the future. So I think that, listen, in order to consistently provide value in each of these phases, you have to be locked in and focused on one thing, building the long-term relationships, right? Because once you stop caring about the money that you're going to make today, because you understand how much money and how much consistent work and how many amazing clients you can have in 10 years, once you change that perspective, then every one of these spaces makes more sense because you're seeing it like, what can I give up today so that tomorrow when, 10 different subs that do my trade reach out to this client, so that I'm guaranteed that he tells them, hey man, I'm good. Like, I don't need no sub for this. I have John and he's an exceptional painter, and that's just who I'm going to use forever because he's not giving me any reason not to. You have to focus on building long-term relationships if that's the outcome you want. And the thing is that this takes time. It takes time and it takes a shitload of patience. And I'll tell you this first, like just personally, because there's been so many times, like I'm a very impatient person. I like to see things start taking off really quick. And for the last 3 years of my life, I've been working on that personally, which is just accept more time. When you accept that building a great relationship simply takes 10 years, then, a lot of patience comes with that. And that gives you a lot of leverage because you don't really worry about getting a client today if you know that you're going to get them in a year. Or, like today, this last week, I closed in on a client that I've been following up on for the last 6 months, right? Because I knew that, hey, regardless if he gives me a work today or tomorrow, I'm going to be here for the next years and I'm going to continue to follow up. And that gives you a lot of leverage and detachment when you're out there marketing and looking for work. Okay, so here are a few things that I have used, that we have used in-house, that has helped us increase our value. The first one is being proactive, right? So you want to help point out mistakes from other trades that can potentially affect our installations. And it's funny that this one I had wrote because one of our GCs hosts this meeting at the end, towards the end of the projects, where all the subs come on site. All of the owners of the subcontracting companies come to the site, and their clients are there. The owners of these GC companies are there, and what they do is they go over all the ending details. So if the painter has something that he needs us to do, then this is when we hash it out and schedule it, right? They do a little talk about what they prioritize, and one of the things that this GC values is the same thing, which is being proactive in identifying and addressing potential issues before they escalate. Right. And that's what I mean by my point. If you go on site and you see that the framing is done wrong, you're going to see that that's going to cause them future damage. And you want to be proactive in communicating with this to them, because if you're saving GC's money and you're giving them exceptional value in return as far as your work goes, this is going to be very helpful. The second point is finding your GC's better options. Yes, that may mean leaving money on the table. Like if a GC comes and tells you, hey, I want this kind of design, but they have a certain budget, you're not going to push to getting the most expensive material. You're going to give them really good options and understand that you may not make the same net amount that you want to make on this one, but that's going to guarantee you 3 more, rather than, pushing for that high-end, high-price sell so that you can make, a 60-70% net on that job and then not get any more work because they're going to feel taken advantage of. So always leave money on the table. A third thing that I do that has helped us is that I ask them for feedback, man. I simply ask them, hey, how are we performing? What can we do better? What did we do in this job site that stood out to you? And what did we do that we can improve on? Okay. But then at the same time, I offer them feedback on our specific niche, right? The thing that I understand the best, stucco and siding. I ask them, or I rather tell them, hey, going forward, you might want to just like look at this when the framers are doing it this way, because this will complicate us going forward. Like we were able to fix it on this one, but on the next one, if you can keep an eye out on that, then, that would be great. I'll appreciate this because this gives them another level of nuanced understanding around your niche that increases their value. Because if they're able to see these little things that they didn't know affected you, right? If they're able to see that at the framing stage, then they could simply tell them, hey, go ahead and fix that and do it this way. And, from here going forward, just do them this way because this makes the flow of the following subcontractors coming after you a lot easier, right? And so this is something that they value a lot. And you got to recognize that you're part of their team, which is one of the things that they were really saying at that meeting, which is if you guys are here, it's because we value you and we know that we're all on the same team. And I thought that was very important, right? You're a subcontractor, you're coming in to do 1 week's worth of work or 1 day's worth of work. That doesn't matter. You have to understand that you're part of this team and you're reflecting that GC's name at the end of the day, right? Yes, we have our own identity. Yes, we are our own company, but they're the ones that are turning in the house at the end to that client. They're the ones doing the majority of the marketing. And so if you can prioritize their name and them having a good review, that's you recognizing that you're all part of the team, and they'll recognize that you're a team player, right? They'll recognize and say, hey, I want to get, Ray and Danyus over to working with us because they take care and they make sure that our site is getting taken care of. So the reality is that, there's really no secret for maintaining your perceived value. There is no secret at all. It's just, you have to force your GCs to value you at each phase. And I think this is a very strong word. It's a very forward pressing word. You have to force your GCs to value, but literally, if you're a new company, if you're a young owner, there's just no other way. You're competing against guys who have been in this for 20, 25 years, well-established relationships with these people. And you got to understand that GCs have a natural thought of subs being a headache. So if they have somebody, even though it may not be the best quality, or even though they may be a little bit of a headache on certain areas, or even they've always wanted or change orders, they deal with them because they know that there's very little good subs out there. So you have to force your GC to see that value in you. And that starts from the initial phase, the outreach phase, which you're doing your outbound and you're doing consistent outbound professionally and pleasurably, right? Because one way or another, you have to find yourself into that door. And yes, that means that if they're not answering, if they're not replying to your emails, if they're not replying to your text, then you show up in person and take that risk and run that risk of being kicked out, of being told, no, we're not interested, right? You have to run that risk because, like I said, you have to force your GCs to value at each one of these phases. You do that by doing the follow-ups. You do that by not settling for not getting an answer, by showing up in the office, right? You do that by performing and executing on your accountability, communication, the quality during the work. And you do that by performing in the last phase, right? The downtime phase, making sure you're still answering your calls, making sure they're still a priority like they were at the beginning of the call. That's going to guarantee that they continue to use you. So listen, I hope that what I was sharing with you guys here was clear. I hope that you understand these three phases, because in these three phases, they're going to be repeated. You're going to see them every time with every client, and it actually restarts with each client, right? So just because you had a very well executed project from beginning to end, whenever you start that new project, there's new problems, there are new states of emotions, it's a whole new job. And so you restart that phase. Now, that's the boring side, right? That's the downside. That's the side that people don't like because it's repetitive, because it's the same thing. But if you look at it, that's the same way that makes this industry scalable. If you can simply see the little intricate things that make each one of these GCs experience a full 360 experience at every job, you can replicate that, right? And then that's when you're able to really standardize who you are in the market and start implementing, your way of doing things. So, like I said, I hope that this is valuable to somebody out there. I hope that if you found value in this, you can leave a comment, leave a like, share this if you want. But I welcome any questions. So I'm mostly active on Instagram. If you always have any particular questions, any very nuanced questions, feel free to reach out or leave them in the comments, and I'm always responding, man. I hope you guys have a great Sunday. I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.